3 teachers, 3 classrooms, 1 question. What is really going on with kids right now? Hey ambassadors, Selly here. Today, we're stepping inside classrooms, real ones right now, to hear directly from teachers on the front lines. Today's episode is a little different. Instead of 1 guest, we're bringing you 3 voices. 3 educators from very different places, each giving us a window into what kids are dealing with right now, what they're struggling with, what's changed, and what hasn't. You're going to hear from a middle school art teacher in South Central LA, a high school teacher in a rural community in Ohio, and a veteran English teacher in Connecticut. 3 perspectives, but 1 reality. If this show helps you see kids and the world they're growing up in a little more clearly, share it, rate it, send it to someone who cares about kids like you do. Let's start in Los Angeles with Rebecca. Rebecca is a visual arts educator with 16 years of experience who rebuilt the arts program at a middle school in South Central LA. Over the course of her career, she taught in over 40 elementary school classrooms throughout the Los Angeles area and developed several community-based arts programs for museums and nonprofits. I love teachers, so I am so excited for this conversation. Rebecca, can you share what you teach and how long you've been teaching and where you teach?
Yeah, so I teach visual art. I've been teaching for more or less 16 years, which is crazy. And currently I'm full-time at a middle school in South Central LA.
Wow, okay.
So I have 7th and 8th graders.
Oh, wow, that's a tough age.
My
Interesting age. Yeah, I love that. See, and that's why teachers are so special, because no matter what age you have them for a reason, because 7th and 8th graders would scare me.
They're not angels.
Yeah.
They're an absolute menace, but it is developmentally appropriate to be a menace at that age.
Correct. See, and you can appreciate that. What is going on in kids' lives these days? Like, what would we all be surprised to see or hear they're struggling with?
I genuinely don't think it's a surprise at all what the 12 to 14-year-old age range is struggling with. It's a lot of like mental health stuff and like social well-being. It's really interesting, the through line of what's just like totally developmentally appropriate for that age, for middle school. Like you're really going through it with all kinds of relationships at home, relationships in friend groups that are like changing dramatically. Everyone's figuring out the relationship to themselves and the relationship to school and the world like at large. And they're also like developing closer romantic relationships and sexual relationships. And that's all very new. And so I would say social well-being is like the everyday stuff. And then that just impacts mood and how they're regulating emotionally. And I have some kids that eat lunch in my room and I was like, hey guys, how would you answer this question? They were like, it's mental health. Like, miss, we're all like so stressed and anxious. And then I was like, say more, what are you stressed about and anxious about? And so it's all those things that I was like, I had in my head. I'm like, it's social stuff for sure.
And that's why I said, like, it's interesting to be in middle school. Like, I remember what it was like to be in middle school, and I can't imagine it now with social media and you're just overwhelmed by all this stuff. But I absolutely appreciate as a parent. I mean, my oldest is still in 4th grade, but you're just like, y'all just enjoy your childhood. Like, you don't really have anything to worry about, but that's not, it's interesting how perspectives shift. And so all the things that you highlighted do make sense, but it's also a good reminder because they're important in their world.
Yeah, because it's forming how they think of themselves and relationship to everything else.
Yeah. I mean, things that, again, arguably as adults still struggle with, right?
Yeah.
In your tenure as a teacher, what policy has created the biggest disruption in the teaching you want to do?
As a visual art teacher, I'm quite removed from some of the main complaints or comments on things that are going on policy-wise in education, but I see it firsthand. So like as a visual art teacher, I'm like, I have the benefit of being outside of a lot of educational policy that's rolled out while also being very close to seeing the way that it doesn't play out the way that districts think that it will play out. So there's a lot of mandated teaching strategies that are sort of passed down from like a big district into individual school sites. Everyone across the district is going to use this ed tech programming because, it's proven to have the best results on test scores. And that is not really how it plays out. But for me, in the visual art classroom, cell phone policy, cell phones are a stressor. I don't think they should be in classrooms. So I do agree that like we should find a way to get them out. But the issue with this policy, the cell phone free policy across this whole school district that I'm in, is that the people responsible for enforcing it are the teachers. And I can't teach if my job is now cell phone cop. And that's not like the thing I'm in the room for. That's not how I'm available to students. And so that feels very frustrating to me. That gets into classroom management for sure. But like I like to let students listen to music while they're working. I can't do that with the cell phone ban. And it's also a huge safety issue too. I'm sure I'll talk about this momentarily, but a lot of my students in the neighborhood are in like big immigrant family populations. And so it's a safety issue. Like parents want to be able to contact their kids at any point because there's just a lot of tension right now and stressors with ICE in neighborhoods. So I could talk about ed tech and district strategies, but like cell phones is like the day-to-day.
Where I live, they recently did implement, I think it was a countywide like school ban, which I as a parent really appreciate. My little ones are still in elementary school. And so I think at that point parents, right, when they get the notice, they can control it a little bit more because oftentimes it's the parents giving it to them. But I imagine in middle school, if they have a phone, they're not really asking if they can take it. It's just theirs. And so I imagine it's a little more difficult. As with all the policies that we work on at First Focus, it is very nuanced. Like it's very hard to set a policy to have it roll out across, kind of like to your point, forget a whole county-wide policy. When you're thinking of certain things across the board, it's really difficult because certain populations require flexibility with whatever that policy is, given the dynamics. We just started talking about mental health, and then that kind of ties directly into what you just mentioned around cell phones because they're anxious. They're anxious likely about, about their peers, if they're going to see them, their parents, vice versa. And so I can imagine that. If you were sitting in on budget conversations, what would you be fighting tooth and nail for?
Counselors. Like 100%. We have counselors in our school. I'm in a Title I school, but this is always the first thing that's getting cut. And given that mental health is just such a huge issue for so many students and in a very system impacted neighborhood like the one that I work in, having access to support at school is very important. And it is really, really frustrating when I'm in like some pretty high need situation where students confided me and literally there's nobody available on campus to manage a situation that needs immediate attention. And even if it doesn't need immediate attention, we need more counselors. The kids are not going to be able to focus on learning if their brain is all a million places at one time, dealing with pretty heavy things. And the counselors that are placed at school sites are stretched so incredibly thin. Yeah, I absolutely budget counselors, more counselors. Doesn't matter how many you have, get some more.
That's a really powerful statement. You knew that definitively. And at First Focus, youth mental health is definitely something that we've been working on increasingly. We work on all issues impacting kids and everything's interconnected. They all bleed together. And mental health is definitely one of those things. At the federal level, one of the things that we do is track how much spending goes to kids, period, across health, education, nutrition, early childhood, everything. And it's 8%. Which is like wild, because kids make up about 25% of the population. And obviously that's different when it comes to education and what's matched at the state and local levels. But when we really dug into pediatric mental health from a health perspective and an education perspective, it's quite shocking. Not only like the existing lack of resources, but oftentimes what we try to also think of is like, okay, what does the pipeline look like? And so even when you think of federal dollars that are spent on mental health, period, the amount of money that's then separated or dedicated for pediatric mental health is like pennies to a dollar. And so I think that sounds right. And I would be fighting tooth and nail with you. Yeah, because it's really, kids have big feelings and they need an outlet.
Big feelings and also like very real and serious concerns that need to be addressed, and they need to have a trustworthy adult on their side. I love being the trustworthy adult for the students that come to me with things, but I'm limited with what I can do within the school day, given that I'm responsible for, like 32 teenagers for however many hours I'm at school, each hour. So like I can't leave my room to go like help them do a thing or find someone. So yeah, having support on campus, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. And, as adults, there's not a shortage of real world things that we worry about, stress, debate about everything from domestic politics to gas prices now to, more recent political violence and war. It's a lot. And I know that a lot of this also trickles down to kids, but for the older kids that you teach, are you seeing that these things weigh on them?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, it's also, this is another like developmental thing where, they're teenagers, they're focused on themselves and their friends, their world is very small. They're like aware of things that are happening globally because they're on social media.
Yeah.
And so I know that global events and stuff is part of their algorithm. Like they're far more aware of stuff than I would have been globally at that age. But it is not the thing that they're necessarily focused on and worrying about most of the time. I will say like stuff that's closer to home, like in the neighborhood, that weighs on kids heavily. I mentioned it already, but ICE is like very present in the neighborhood that I work in. I have lots of students who have family members that are undocumented and, wonder if mom and dad are going to be home or grandma's going to be home when they get home from school. Parents that can't come to graduations or award ceremonies because they're not leaving the house at this time. Parents that are leaving the house to go to their job, just risking it. I've had students watch their neighbors be taken out of their house in the middle of the night. I mean, that's very real and heavy. It's sort of just like a constant presence that everyone knows about and affects some kids more than others. And then also there's, a fair amount of gun violence in the neighborhood as well that affects families. I've had students that have been shot, and so that affects the whole school community as well. So the farther away a big issue, the less I would say interested or attentive they are. But the things in the neighborhood itself are pretty heavy, big things. So it's a lot. And yet when you ask them how they're doing, they're going to talk about their crush, their mom, their friends that they're in a fight with. So it's still middle school.
Yeah. Yeah. In your school in particular, are there tools for both children? I know that we had talked about like the need for more counselors, but barring that, are there just general resources and tools for the way teachers can communicate or support kids, and then also parents? And I know there's like a growing, when we were talking about mental health, like peer-to-peer mental health options. Are you seeing any of that in your school? Are those resources available?
In the last year and a half, there's been a really big uptick in resources for immigrant families, for Know Your Rights. And that has felt very reassuring, I think, for students and their families as well. I know that our school hosts like a number of workshops on Zoom for families of like parenting teenagers, various themes and topics that come up when you're parenting teenagers. And then just community resources. I know that there will be like a big, huge dentist van that comes by our school every 6 months, and like people from the community and all the kids get their like dental checkups. In the summer, I know they have big farm produce drop-offs at the school that people can come pick up. So in terms of mental health, like on the counselor side, I am sure that there are, but it's not like since I'm not a counselor, I'm not as familiar with how to access those quickly, which is why I'm always like, the few counselors we have, I got them on speed dial because I'm like, hey, can you help me out with this?
I think even just you being an art teacher, art is such a release for so many. I know even for me, that you're doing that organically. Even when we talk about budget and restructuring of schools, I think the arts are so important to maintain across the board.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I agree with that,
Yeah.
obviously. I know after COVID, a lot of schools in California got extra funding for arts-specific teaching positions for schools to add new teaching positions in the arts. So that is how my position at the school is funded, meaning prior to me, there was not visual art at the school for many, many, many years. And so it was a challenge coming in and like kind of building off of nothing being there. But now that I've been there a number of years, it just feels incredibly rewarding and absolutely see like the benefit. Like we've done a bunch of murals in the school. You know, I love that I have both 7th and 8th graders. So most of the kids that art is their elective, I see them 2 years in a row. So I really get to know them very well. And that's great. I mean, I've had a lot of experience going in as like an outside contracting position, mostly for elementary school classrooms where you go in like once a week and you have like 800 students and it's craziness. So getting to like see the same kids every day feels really great for like increasing that relationship and being able to like kind of work with students through different problems as you get to know them over time using art.
Yeah. One of the things that we ask on the podcast is just, what music keeps you going? And I can only imagine the music that's playing in your room, but what keeps you going or your students going? What do they listen to?
We have fun. Sometimes I'll do like people suggest songs we make together playlists, which is always hilarious because they're all, half of them are like, oh, I'm like really cool. I'm like into this indie thing right now. Or, oh, this like rapper goes hard. And then one kid will be like, please put Baby Shark on. So it's like middle school's so funny because like half of them are like, I'm fully grown. You cannot tell me what to do. And they're like taller than me and they have like a mustache and they're like, they look like they're an adult. And then half of them are like, are you in 4th grade still? You're a baby. No, I mean, I feel like in class playlists, I usually do like a lot of like Janae Aiko, Frank Ocean, Kali Uchis.
That sets the mood for some nice art.
Yeah. Vibey, cool. But like on my own in the car to and from work, it's like 90s nostalgia.
I mean, because what's better? I was just having a debate over the weekend. I don't even know why, with a 4th and a 5th grader talking about how millennial music is the worst. And I'm just like, you guys have no idea. You have no clue. Like, I'm not even going to have this conversation with you.
That's so funny.
Rebecca, thank you so much for your time and thank you for all that you do.
Yeah. I mean, it's like my greatest joy. I love it.
I love that. That was Rebecca, teaching middle school in South Central LA. And what she said about mental health being the through line, that shows up everywhere. But the way it shows up can look very different depending on where kids are growing up. Next, we're heading somewhere very different, a rural school, far from a big city, but hearing some of the same challenges, just in a different form. We're heading to Ohio to talk with Tracy. Tracy is a longtime educator and coach with 25 years at Lakota High School, where he has taught health and physical education, mentored new teachers, led athletic programs across multiple sports, and helped students build lifelong skills both inside and outside the classroom.
This is my 25th year of teaching high school, and for the last about 10 to 12 years, I've strictly taught physical education. Before that, I taught health and phys ed. Next year, I will also be kind of broadening what I do. I will have a CCP, so our college level. I'll have a technology class. So that's all new to me there. I'm excited about that because it's something different, something new.
Oh my gosh, so you are busy.
Yep. It's starting to slow down, but yes, I've been busy my whole career. So it's, not just with teaching, but I also am a coach or was a coach. I've since hung that up for now since my kids got old enough, but yes.
Well, I appreciate coaches. So I have 3 kids. One of my sons is 7 and just started soccer for the first time. And it's a special skill. And I think especially with young kids, but arguably all kids, your coach really matters.
And that's huge there is making it fun for the kids because they do it because they love to do it.
Yeah. In your opinion, what is going on in kids' lives these days? What would we all be surprised to see them struggling with or hear them struggling with? What's top of mind for them?
What I see they struggle with a lot is communication.
Mm.
They can't just sit and have a conversation. They can't talk to you face to face and even just look you in the eye, because most of the way they communicate is, over the computer or over a cell phone. They type it out. They don't have these conversations. Ohio has put in a law to where they're not supposed to have their cell phones at school. And I do lunch duty, and before, all the kids would be on their phones. They'd be, texting, watching videos, whatever it be. And they are now communicating with one another. They are talking, they are having conversations instead of just, you can say a lot of things when there's no face to who you're saying it to. And now they have to be held accountable for what they say to that person. So that's the big thing for these kids is actually having a conversation.
Have you noticed a shift in education, like over your 20 years? If I were to ask you this before COVID and before cell phones were widely available, was this always a thing?
Yes, but it just got worse. As the phones got better, as the technology got better, it got worse. Before COVID and before we were shut down, none of the kids had a computer of their own. They had computers here at school they could use, but they didn't have a computer on their own. So they weren't on the computer the whole time they were in school. There were times and they were on the computer, and a lot of times they were not. So that's definitely a big shift when it comes to technology and what it can do.
That makes sense. And it's actually reassuring to hear that, in your opinion, that it's kind of always been a challenge, but it's just, the phones may have exacerbated it a bit.
Yeah, the kids can't put them down half the time. So for them to not be able to use it at school, it was kind of a struggle at first. But, they got used to it. They adapt. They're kids. They can adapt to that. It's just about the expectations that we have as the adults. So
correct. Absolutely. In your tenure as a teacher, what policy has created the biggest disruption in teaching?
Over my tenure, state testing has been one of the biggest difficulties. State testing has changed from, the time when I was in school until now. I bet we've had 7 or 8 different styles of testing and different expectations for these kids. At one point, we had the freshman class was on one test, the junior class was on another test, and the seniors had to do something different just to graduate. So that policy shift there when it comes to state testing, it's been difficult. Here lately, we've been pretty much in the same for the last, 5, 6, maybe a little bit more years. We've been on the same path. Little tweaks here and there with the testing, which are to be expected. But I would say that has been the biggest challenge, is to get these kids in the right direction with the test they're supposed to take. So.
Oh, wow. I love that. I really appreciate that answer, because we haven't had someone bring that up. And I know, just as a parent, and also, again, many conversations that I've had with our president, he really is not a huge fan of all the shifts in standardized testing over the years.
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah.
It's difficult for the kids. It's difficult for us as teachers.
Yeah.
So not even in a tested area, but it's still difficult.
Yeah, I imagine, because so much of your curriculum has to shift to kind of get these kids prepared for the testing, which, then has an impact on resources and all these things at a more macro level.
Yep.
If you were sitting in on budget conversations at your school, what would you be fighting tooth and nail for?
I don't know that there's one thing. I honestly don't know that I can say that there's one thing that I would fight. Yeah, we need this, we need this, we need this, because it's a broad spectrum. Because one kid could need more help in this, so we need to really focus on the sciences, or we really need to focus on the maths, or we really need to focus on the arts. I don't think it's one area. I don't think it's one thing. And I don't think it's just phys ed, or the athletic portion of it either. As a coach, it's a tough area to focus on just one thing. So
it's interesting. One of the core pillars of our work at First Focus is our work on the budget. We track the share of federal spending as it relates to children and families. And as an organization, we work on all issues impacting kids. And we created a children's budget coalition of all these different national, state level groups that come together. And the biggest singular challenge when we first created this coalition was getting folks to understand and really buy into the concept of we just need more funding across the board. Like it's really hard to focus on, okay, just education funding at the expense of health, right? Or like early childhood supports at the expense of child welfare, juvenile justice supports. And so I can see that. As adults, there's not a shortage of real world challenges and things that we think about that come top of mind, from domestic politics to, war to gas prices to you name it. For older kids that you teach, are these things weighing on them? Are they just kind of in their own little bubble of youthful bliss?
For most students, yes, they are in their own bubble of youthful bliss. And the school I teach at, we are literally out in the cornfields. We are not in a big city. We're not in a city. The towns, they're actually labeled as villages. 1,000 people would be a stretch for some of these. Some of our villages may only have like 300, 400 people at the most. When it comes to the events that are going on in our society beyond our little area here, there's a lot of them that, they are in that youthful bliss. And now some of them, they are very cognizant of what's going on in not only the state and the country, but the world. So I don't know that it stresses them out any, but they are aware of it. I know our history and our social studies teachers here at school, they try to make them aware of the stuff, but some of them are just in their own little world. So
somehow that puts a smile on my face to a degree. What are your worries for kids these days?
There's a lot of them. It depends on the kid. Some of the kids, they don't have the best home life, whether it be single parent or low income or it could be any number of reasons. Those kids worry me more than, quote, good kids that, they've got their head on their shoulders. They'll persevere through any struggles that they may have. So it's the kids that, don't have that support at home necessarily, or don't have the mentorship that other kids do there at home. So
that makes sense. What music keeps you going when you're having a rough day?
I listen to a lot of country music. I grew up in the country. I lived, on a small farm. I was a part of helping the neighbor farm and milk cows. So that just brings me to what I grew up with and kind of the life I have. I enjoy being outdoors, and that's what it talks a lot about. So that kind of brings me back in, where it calms me down and, puts me in a better state of mind a lot of times.
Yeah, the power of music is something.
It is. It truly is.
Tracy, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of the things that you brought up were, again, complement, but then also add layer and texture. And a lot of, again, our work at the federal level is also trying to better understand and target resources for kids, obviously, across the country. But there is a lot of nuance. A lot of these policies and a lot of these things happen for kids that have very, very different lives, right?
Yes.
And now when you're thinking of a lot of the cuts that we're really starting to see may come trickle down, it's going to impact rural kids and communities disproportionately.
Yes.
And so your perspective is really helpful.
Where we live, like I said, this school it's a K-12 building. It's a fairly new building, but it is literally out in the middle of the cornfield. So all of our tax base, we have very little industry within our tax base. It is families and farmers. That's where our tax base comes from. And that makes it difficult. So it takes a lot of creative spending and, mindfulness on what we spend and how we spend it. So
yeah, money matters. We say that a lot. The research shows it, and anyone that has kids, there's a cost to a lot of things, and there's only much you can shift on families or schools. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So now we've heard from a middle school in LA and a rural high school in Ohio. And what's striking is different places, different kids, but some of the same patterns. Phones, disconnection, big feelings, and in some cases, not enough support to meet those needs. After the break, we're going to hear from a third teacher, 18 years in the classroom, who's going to take us even deeper into what's changed for kids over time. and what some of those policy decisions are really doing inside the classroom. Welcome back, ambassadors. We've been hearing from teachers across the country about what kids are navigating right now, socially, emotionally, and inside the classroom. Now we're heading to Connecticut to hear from Elizabeth, a high school English teacher with 18 years of experience in a large urban district in New England, where she's worked extensively with alternative education students, multilingual learners, and diverse classrooms to make literature meaningful, engaging, and relevant to all kinds of readers. Elizabeth has had a front row seat to how things have changed.
I've been an English language arts teacher for, it feels like 5 years, but it's been 18 years. I have spent all 18 of those years in the same high school. It's a Title I high school, extremely diverse. The first 9 years of my career, I taught an alternative team. So it was for students who did not pass freshman year for a whole host of reasons, many of them behavioral, some of them academic. But I do work in a district where we focus a lot on, how do I want to put this? Like the whole student. We're not just worried about just academics. Like we realize students come to us with a lot of baggage, good and bad. It's an interesting place to work. A lot of diversity, a lot of fun times, a lot of struggles, a lot of hardship.
I love that because, at First Focus, we work on all issues impacting kids from like health, education, nutrition, early childhood, poverty. And we very much, even though they're like siloed buckets, we also look at kids like in a very comprehensive way. But what is going on in kids' lives these days? What would we all be surprised to see or hear that they're struggling with?
I'm really glad you asked that question because I've been talking about this a lot just in the last few weeks because we're getting towards the end of the year. I know my students now. We've built those connections. I love these kids and then they're going to leave me in 2 months. But I think people would be really surprised at how little is going on. When we were in high school, we went to the movies, we all listened to music, like we did so much. There was so much that contributed to like the culture of being a teenager. And you might not be surprised to find out that the biggest culture creator for teenagers is TikTok. Everything comes from these short little videos. They don't watch movies. They don't watch television. They don't dance. They don't never do these things, but primarily everything comes from these short form videos. So I feel like they're missing out on a lot. Things have really changed for students. Kids just aren't into the things that we were into that you would think teenagers would universally forever be into.
That's interesting.
It's upsetting.
It is. I remember like going to the library after school, not to necessarily study, but to just hang out.
Socialize.
Yeah, just to socialize.
And literally my last class ended at 2:10. I logged in here at 2:19 and I have not seen a student walk by my door. They go home and they get on their phones and that's about it.
Wow.
Very different.
Wow. In your tenure as a teacher, what policy has created the biggest disruption in the teaching that you want to do?
This probably will not surprise anybody, but it's what's called grading for equity, but it means that nobody can fail. It started with everybody, nobody can get below a 50, and now we've kind of backed off a little, and the minimum grade that we're allowed to give a student is a 40, even if they don't come to school ever. So while I understand why that was a push and why, students don't come to school and don't do the work for a variety of reasons, it's hurting kids. It's not helping them. It's not encouraging them. It's not enticing them to learn or to be curious or to be part of their own education. They know they can come and do a couple of things and get that 59 and move on. These policies have really just taken like the whole bite out of education and school and motivation, and they don't have to do anything to pass.
Wow, I did not realize that. When did this become policy?
So it came about during the pandemic because everybody had different access to education. So whether you had a laptop or Wi-Fi or whatever. So, we can't penalize kids who can't log into class, right? Which totally makes sense. But now we're 6 years later, and I have a student who has 68 absences, and he has a 40%. He could come into the fourth quarter and do really, really well and pass for the year. So I think these policies have really hurt kids.
And it seems like that's not setting them up for like whatever batch of teachers they're going to get in the next grade.
Yeah.
It seems like that may lend itself to an even more challenging teaching environment.
Well, and I want to stay kid focused, but for teachers, it's really demoralizing. We work so hard and we prepare these lessons and we try to engage them and build relationships. And, we come every day fresh and they can show up And then the other kids who are really excited to be here and motivated and love coming to school and participating, well, what's the point when, I did bad on my quiz and I got a 50 and he didn't even show up and he got a 40. So what was the point of me even studying?
Wow.
Yeah.
If you were sitting in on budget conversations at your school, what would you be fighting tooth and nail for?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that because I think schools, so I have this whole vision, right? Like schools and libraries should be places for the community. This should be a place where families can come, kids can come for almost anything they need. Like I love that our school has a student-based health center in it. Like kids can go get their physicals, they can go get vaccinations in school. I think we should have food pantries. I think we should have laundry machines available. I would really advocate if I was on that budget committee for I don't even know what you would call that. Like, what would you call all that ancillary stuff that makes life better that many of my students do not have access to and will never have access to?
Yeah, I mean, it's comprehensive learning, comprehensive community. We interviewed at the Enoch Public Library in Baltimore, Maryland.
Mhm.
They expanded one of their libraries to also include like a completely free grocery store.
Oh my gosh.
And it's one of these things that, again, even at First Focus, like we, again, mostly do policy at the federal level. But if you're thinking of a very child-centric in terms of what is the most vulnerable child and family in your community need and kind of start there, it would be all those things, right?
Right?
I know some elementary schools in the DMV do have laundry machines.
Mhm.
And I thought that was like, I had never known a school to have.
It's a big deal when kids don't have clean clothes. Kids notice and then they become the smelly kid, and that stays with you and it crushes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As adults, there's not a shortage of real world things that we worry about, stress about, debate about, everything from domestic policy to international
Mhm.
policy to gas prices to now war. And none of this even factors into things that are going on, for us personally. But for older kids that you teach, are these things weighing on them, or are they kind of in this blissful TikTok world of other stuff?
They are unaware, but some are very aware. So I don't teach any honors classes. I don't teach any ECE or AP classes. I just have like kind of the average student, right? Maybe college bound, maybe job bound, maybe military bound, and they're not interested in current events. Yet when I bring up something that happened, they can't learn enough. They can't read about it enough. They can't believe that that was said or that was done. And you're lying, miss. You're lying. Oh no, it's very real. So when you tell them, they get into it, but on their own, they're not generally curious about news. No, which is such a bummer. There's so many crazy things happening. My God.
Well, and I'm kind of thinking because you're also teaching older kids that are on the cusp of being able to vote. It's like, are
Oh
they
my
even
gosh.
interested? Are they thinking about it?
Well, one of the things we offer, we register them to vote in school if they want to. There's nothing is forced, and of course we encourage voting. And then when voting day comes, go vote. You're registered, and it's happening here. And no, I got to get lunch. And I think that attitude kind of pervades into adulthood too. People, they know voting is important. They know where they stand on many of the issues. They're mostly educated. Well, I got things to do that day.
Jeez.
Yeah, the apathy makes me insane.
I know. It's wild. We touched on this a little bit, but what are your worries for kids these days?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I worry, where are they going to live? Like, how are they going to afford rent and housing? Where are they going to go? Like, that's my number one worry. Like, I look at these kids and how are they going to rent an apartment? Like, there's not going to be get a roommate, get an apartment when you're 20. It might be get a roommate and get an apartment when you're 33. Things have changed. So I worry about that a lot. And I also really worry about that they're missing on all the fun socialization parts of being like a teenager and young adult. They don't socialize a ton. Hallways are quieter than they've ever been between classes. We have 1,700 students in my school, and hallways, they can definitely get rowdy. Don't get me wrong. Things pop off all the time. But for the most part, it's kind of calm. I ask what they're doing for the weekend, and they're not doing anything. They're going to be on their phones.
That is so fascinating.
Yeah, I can't believe it, honestly. Like, I could not wait to get out of my house, like, as soon as I turned 13, like, as much as I could, as frequently as I could, anywhere I could, and they're not interested.
And my kids are little, right? So it's like they're kind of the only frame I have. And when COVID
Right.
hit, luckily,
Oof.
unluckily, I don't know. Like we were still their favorite people, right? And it's like my
Yes.
oldest was still in pre-K and we kind of got over it. But thinking about your kids, they were probably in
7th, 8th grade, yeah.
like,
Super formative years, yeah.
and I always have wondered about how is this going to play out, right? Because it's like we're never thinking about stuff in the future. It's always like, well, what's the immediate need? What's the immediate Band-Aid? But
Right.
as we think about education, at least for this like wave of kids, like I don't know at what point, but definitely your kids are in that cluster of, yeah, they've missed their time to socialize. And especially now with social, it's just, I don't know if you get that back.
Right. And I don't think they do. And maybe in 5 years, kids change so frequently and they, these kids will have been very young when the pandemic happened. But for the current kids who were in their formative years, I think it really, really did something to their socialization. And I think they're really missing out on a lot of formative experiences that most adults have and we won't be able to talk about as a group anymore.
Yeah. No more sneaking into the movies. Like you get your
Right.
one ticket and you're like there all
What
day.
did you do? Like they stayed home.
Right.
They didn't go watch 6 movies in a row on one ticket. Not that I would ever do such a thing.
Exactly. No, that would not be okay.
No, that'd be inappropriate.
Well, we ask every guest on this show because we think that music is a great way to kind of just like reset your mind sometimes. What music keeps you going or your students going? We can open this up.
So I really don't want to reset my mind. I have watched the Bad Bunny Super Bowl halftime show an embarrassing amount of times. When the camera opens and he's staring right in it and then, dancing on the light pole, it's fantastic. Every minute of that show is wonderful. And I'm a little embarrassed that I'm still watching it however many weeks later. So
I daydream about a trip to Puerto Rico and meeting him. So
I wish he would greet me at the gate. Oh my God, I love him so much.
On that note, thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
It was so wonderful. Thank you for having me.
3 teachers, 3 completely different environments, and yet the same undercurrent. Kids are more connected than ever, and somehow more disconnected at the same time. They're dealing with big feelings, mental health, stress, identity, earlier and more intensely. And maybe the most surprising thing, it's not just what kids are struggling with, it's what they're missing. Unstructured time, face-to-face connection, the messiness and the magic of just being a kid in the world. If we want to support kids better, we can't just look at one issue, phones, or mental health, or education policy. We have to look at the whole picture, because that's what teachers are doing every single day. And maybe the simplest place to start, ask a kid how they're doing, and actually listen. If this episode gave you a new lens on what kids are carrying right now, share it with someone who's raising, teaching, or supporting a child. Speaking of Kids is a podcast by First Focus on Children,